This morning, a Bandera mother facing charges for allegedly abandoning her daughter in San Antonio. The 15-year-old girl has autism and is unable to care for herself. According to court documents, she was found on June 8th at a coffee shop near Loop 1604 and Petranco. Documents show an employee found the girl locked in a dumpster enclosure. The girl's grandmother called the sheriff's office when her mom came home without her. Nearly 2 months later, Natalie Munno was arrested in a charge of child endangerment and abandonment without the intent to return.
The girl you see here is just 15 years old. She is nonverbal. She has autism. And on a hot June afternoon in San Antonio, her own mother led her by the hand straight into a dumpster enclosure. Surveillance cameras captured it all. The mother opens the heavy gate, walks her daughter inside, and shuts the metal doors behind her. Seconds later, she walks back to her car. She drives away. The child never comes out. Hours pass, the Texas heat rises, and inside that locked dumpster space, the girl is left alone. When she is finally found, she is dehydrated, frightened, and wearing a soiled diaper. An Amber Alert goes out. A grandmother begs for answers, and the city watches in disbelief as the truth comes into focus. The one person who should have protected her had abandoned her. But how did a child go from being cared for by her mother to being left to dehydrate in the Texas heat? June 13, 2024. It began like any other Thursday in San Antonio. But for a vulnerable 15-year-old girl, it would become the day her world changed forever. The timeline is chilling in its simplicity. At approximately 2 p.m., surveillance cameras at a shopping center off Loop 1604 captured a silver car pulling into the far corner of the lot. It parks near a row of dumpsters, surrounded by tall metal gates. The area is meant to hide trash bins from public view. Instead, it would become the setting for one of the most disturbing acts of betrayal this city has ever seen. From the driver's side, a woman steps out. She is later identified as 38-year-old Natalie Rose Munno. She walks to the back door and opens it. A teenage girl, wearing loose clothing, steps slowly out. She does not speak. She does not resist. She simply follows. The mother holds her daughter by the arm and guides her across the hot pavement. Step by step, they approach the dumpster enclosure. The camera does not blink. It does not lie. At 2:05 p.m., Munno opens the heavy metal doors. She leads her daughter inside. The girl disappears into the shadows of the walled-off space. The mother steps back out alone. She pulls the doors shut. The sound of metal scraping against concrete echoes faintly. Then she walks calmly to her car, gets in, and drives away. The girl is left behind. No words, no explanation, no promise to return. Hours pass. The summer heat of San Antonio bears down. The walls of the enclosure trap the air, turning it into an oven. The pavement radiates heat from below, and behind those closed gates, a vulnerable child sits alone. She cannot call out. She cannot find her way out. She cannot tell time. She cannot understand why the one person she trusted most is gone. By 5 p.m., the shopping center begins to empty. Families pick up groceries. Cars move in and out of parking spaces. Yet behind the dumpster wall, time feels endless. At 7:45 p.m., a security guard making his evening rounds hears something faint. It is not a scream, not words, just the sound of movement. He approaches the dumpster enclosure. He pulls open the doors. What he sees stops him cold. A teenage girl, sitting on the ground. Her clothes are damp with sweat. Her face is pale. Her breathing is shallow. She wears a soiled diaper. Her eyes search but do not connect. She does not say a word. The guard reaches for his radio. Within minutes, first responders arrive. They lift the girl gently, place her on a stretcher, and wheel her toward the ambulance. Paramedics call in her condition: severe dehydration, weakness, signs of neglect. They ask if anyone knows who she is. No ID, no explanation, no parent waiting nearby. For the officers on scene, the questions are immediate and overwhelming. Who left her here? How long had she been inside? And why was there no missing child report connected to her yet? The girl herself cannot answer. She has no words to explain what happened. No way to describe the hours she spent alone in the heat. No way to tell them who drove her there and walked away. But the cameras can. The footage will soon confirm what investigators feared. This was not a case of a lost child wandering away. This was not an accident. It was deliberate. A mother had chosen to leave her daughter behind. As night falls over San Antonio, the city is unaware of the storm that is about to break. A child has been rescued, But the truth of what happened and why is only beginning to come to light. For 5 long days, no one in the family knew where she was. On the evening of June 18th, the girl's grandmother finally could not take the silence any longer. She picked up the phone and dialed the sheriff's office. Her voice shook as she explained that her granddaughter, 15 years old, autistic and nonverbal, was missing. She had not been seen for days. She had not been brought home, and the one person who should have been responsible, her own mother, was giving no clear answers. The panic in her words was unmistakable. A grandmother raising her concerns, a grandmother who knew her granddaughter's routines, her limitations, her needs. This was not a child who could simply vanish. This was not a child who could run away on her own. Something was terribly wrong. The dispatcher logged the call. An officer was assigned. And from that moment, the search was no longer private. It became official. Investigators began with the basics. When was the girl last seen? Who was she with? And what explanations had been offered? The grandmother repeated what little she knew. Her daughter, Natalie, had said the teen was safe, that she had been placed with someone else. But there were no details, no paperwork, no names, just vague reassurances. For a seasoned officer, these were immediate red flags. A mother's story that could not be verified. A vulnerable child with no voice of her own. A timeline that was already days old. By the next morning, June 18th, the case escalated. The decision was made. Issue an Amber Alert. Across San Antonio, phones lit up with emergency tones. Screens displayed the alert. Missing endangered child. 15 years old. Nonverbal. Last seen with her mother. Local television and radio interrupted broadcasts. The girl's face appeared on posters, digital billboards, and news tickers. The alert spread quickly. Neighbors reposted it on Facebook. Strangers shared it on Twitter and Instagram. Community groups began to ask questions. How could a child with such high needs simply disappear? Why had it taken days before the alert went out? In living rooms across the city, parents hugged their own children a little tighter. For families raising children with disabilities, the fear struck especially deep. They knew the challenges, they knew the risks, and they knew that this was not a case of a teen wandering off unnoticed. Meanwhile, the grandmother waited by the phone. Every ring, every knock at the door brought a rush of hope and dread. She prayed her granddaughter would be found alive. She replayed every conversation with her daughter in her mind, searching for clues, trying to make sense of words that made no sense at all. Investigators pressed the mother again. Where was her daughter? Who had her? Why was she not at home? Natalie repeated the same story, that she had given her to someone named Sara, supposedly a contact with Child Protective Services. But no one by that name existed. No records backed up her claim. The grandmother's voice cracked in interviews. She described her granddaughter as gentle, dependent, trusting. She could not speak for herself. She could not defend herself. She relied on the people around her to keep her safe. And now those very people had failed her. Behind the scenes, detectives combed through records, surveillance footage, and phone data. They traced Natalie's movements in the days before the grandmother's call. And slowly, the cracks in her story widened. The timeline she offered did not match the evidence. The places she claimed to be did not line up with cameras and witnesses. But the public did not yet know this. To them it was still a mystery. A missing child. An Amber Alert flashing her face. A family torn apart by fear and confusion. In neighborhoods across San Antonio, people began organizing searches. Volunteers checked parks, alleys, and abandoned buildings. Others stood ready to hand out flyers. For a few days, it seemed as though the entire city had taken on the weight of one grandmother's desperation. And yet, even as the community searched, the truth was already locked away in a hard drive. The silent footage of a shopping center camera that had seen everything. June 18, 2024. The silence breaks. At 10:15 a.m., the Texas Center for the Missing issues the order. Activate the Amber Alert. Across San Antonio, cell phones vibrate with the piercing tone of an emergency notification. Screens light up with a photo. A 15-year-old girl, identified only by her first name and description. Nonverbal, autistic, endangered, last seen with her mother. Radio stations carry the same words. Drivers on their morning commutes hear the alert come through the speakers. For some, it is just another tragic headline. For others, it feels personal. Within minutes, the photo begins spreading on social media. Facebook posts multiply. Local groups share the image with captions like, "Please help find her. Vulnerable. Needs care. Share this now." On Twitter and Instagram, hashtags emerge. People comment, "How could a child like this be missing for days without anyone noticing?" The alert spreads fast. But even as thousands of people scroll past her photo, a disturbing question lingers. Why did no one connect her to the child already rescued days earlier behind a dumpster? Investigators know the answer lies in the timeline. On June 13th, when the girl was first discovered, there was no missing persons report tied to her. No one had claimed her. No one had filed the paperwork that would link her identity to her condition. She was a Jane Doe in the system, until her grandmother finally reported her missing days later. The public does not know these details yet. All they see is a vulnerable child at risk, and a mother who is supposedly with her. For the grandmother, the alert is both hope and torment. Hope, because now the world is looking. Torment, because it confirms what she already feared. Her granddaughter is missing, and she may be in danger. In living rooms across the city, people begin to talk. Parents show the alert to their children. Teachers mention it in classrooms. Strangers message one another. Have you seen this girl? Community members question the delay. Why June 18? Why not June 13? 5 days can mean the difference between life and death. The case begins to feel bigger than one family. It becomes a mirror for how society treats its most vulnerable. A child who cannot speak, cannot explain, cannot cry out for help. A system that moves slowly. A public that learns too late. Behind the scenes, investigators are already piecing the puzzle together. Surveillance footage from the shopping center has surfaced. Detectives watch in silence as the truth unfolds frame by frame. The Amber Alert is telling the public one story, that the girl may be with her mother, but the cameras are already telling another. The city shares, reposts, reacts. The grandmother waits by the phone, and detectives prepare for the moment when they will have to reveal the truth, that the girl found abandoned days earlier, and the girl in the Amber Alert, are one and the same. A grandmother searching. A community alerted. A city asking questions. And a mystery deepening with every hour. The Amber Alert had been issued. The community was searching. The grandmother was waiting by the phone, and behind closed doors, detectives were reviewing the one piece of evidence that would shatter the mother's story completely. The shopping center on Loop 1604 had cameras mounted high, their lenses angled toward the parking lot, and the dumpster enclosures along the edge. On June 13th, one of those cameras caught everything. Detectives loaded the footage into the system. They adjusted the timestamp. They pressed play. Frame 1. A silver car pulling into the lot. It is mid-afternoon, the sun casting long shadows. The car slows near the dumpsters. Frame 2. The driver's door opens. A woman steps out. Later she will be identified as Natalie Rose Munno. She moves with purpose, not hesitation. She walks to the back door. Frame 3. The door opens. A teenage girl steps out. She does not speak. She does not resist. She simply follows her mother's lead. The video rolls on. Munno holds her daughter by the arm. The girl walks slowly, obediently. Together, they cross the pavement toward the metal gates. At 2:05 p.m., Munno pulls the gate open. She leads her daughter inside. The camera does not blink. It captures the moment the girl disappears behind the wall. Seconds later, Munno emerges alone. She pulls the doors shut. The sound of metal scraping against concrete echoes faintly on the footage. Then she walks calmly to her car, opens the door, gets in, and drives away. Detectives sit in silence. The evidence is undeniable. For days, Munno had told a different story. She claimed she had entrusted her daughter to a woman named Sara, from Child Protective Services. She described handing the girl over in a Costco parking lot. She insisted her daughter was safe. But the footage tells the truth. There was no Sara, no social worker, no handoff, only abandonment. What began as a missing persons report, escalated into an Amber Alert, is now confirmed as a crime. A mother's lie collapses under the weight of the camera's lens. Detectives compare the footage with the timeline. The grandmother's missing child report filed on June 18. The Amber Alert issued the same day. And the video captured on June 13, showing the truth that had been hidden in plain sight all along. For the officers watching, the horror is twofold. Not only was the child left behind, but she was left behind deliberately. No panic, no second thoughts, just a mother walking away. The girl's silence on the footage is almost more haunting than if she had cried out. She follows because that is what she has always done. She trusts because that is all she knows. And in that trust she is betrayed. Investigators replay the footage again and again, ensuring every detail is logged. The timestamp, the car's license plate, the mother's movements, the girl's compliance. Every second now becomes part of the official record. Word spreads quickly through the department. The missing child case is no longer a mystery. It is a crime scene. The victim survived, but the evidence is as damning as if she had not. The grandmother is notified. Her voice breaks when detectives explain what they have seen. The hope that her daughter might be telling the truth disappears. In its place is anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. The Amber Alert remains active, but behind the scenes, the narrative shifts. The public still believes the girl may be missing with her mother. Detectives now know better. They know the child was left to suffer, alone, in the heat of a Texas summer. A grandmother prays for justice. Detectives prepare their case, and in the silence of the evidence room, the grainy footage continues to loop. A mother walking away, a gate closing, and a child left behind. For days, Natalie Munno repeated the same story.
She insisted she had not abandoned her daughter. She claimed she had done the opposite, that she had placed her into the hands of Child Protective Services. According to her, the handoff happened in a Costco parking lot. The person she gave her to? A woman named Sara. Munno described Sara as an employee of CPS. She said Sara had agreed to take the girl, to provide the care and supervision she needed. Munno told investigators she believed her daughter was safe. That was the line she repeated again and again. But from the beginning, the story did not fit. Investigators asked for details. What was Sara's last name? No answer. A phone number? She didn't have it. Which CPS office did Sara work out of? Silence. Was there paperwork? A release form? A case number? Nothing. Seasoned detectives recognized the signs. They had seen lies dressed up as truth before, and this one was unraveling fast. They pressed her further. What day did the handoff happen? She hesitated. What time? She guessed. Which Costco location? She changed her answer. Every question made the cracks wider. At the same time, investigators contacted CPS directly. They asked if any employee named Sara had taken custody of the girl. The response was immediate and clear. No such person existed. There was no record, no case, no transfer. On June 13th, security cameras showed her leading her daughter into a dumpster enclosure. The footage proved she closed the doors, walked away, and left her child behind. Days later, she told police she handed the girl over to a social worker. One version of events was backed by evidence. The other was built on lies. Detectives confronted her with the footage. They played the video. They paused the frame where she shut the gate. They pointed to the timestamp. They asked her to explain what the camera had recorded. Munno shifted in her chair. Her eyes darted. She repeated fragments of her story. That she trusted Sara. That CPS had arranged it. That she believed her daughter was being cared for. But her words rang hollow against the silent testimony of the video. There was no Sara. No paperwork. No CPS involvement. Only a mother walking away. For investigators, the motive remained unclear. Was it desperation? Was it exhaustion? Or was it something darker? A deliberate choice to discard the child she no longer wanted to care for. Whatever the motive, the evidence spoke louder than her words. The handoff in a Costco parking lot was a fiction. The name Sara was invented. The lie was exposed. By now the community was demanding answers. The grandmother's pleas echoed in the news. Neighbors expressed outrage. On social media, people condemned the betrayal. Comment after comment asked the same thing. How could a mother abandon her child? Detectives documented every inconsistency. They logged every false claim. They built the case not just on what Munno did, but on the web of lies she spun afterward. The girl's silence made her an easy victim. She could not correct her mother's story. She could not tell investigators what really happened. But the truth was written in the footage, and it was written in the lies Munno told when pressed. By the end of the interrogation, the narrative was clear. Munno's story had collapsed. Her lies had been exposed, and the path toward formal charges was now unavoidable. A mother had spoken of Sara, of CPS, of a handoff that never happened. But the evidence showed the only handoff was at the gates of a dumpster enclosure. No Sara. No paperwork. No CPS involvement. When paramedics lifted the girl from the dumpster enclosure on June 13th, her condition was already fragile. She was weak, overheated, and confused. She had no words to describe what she felt, no voice to cry out, but her body told the story. At the emergency room, doctors documented her state. She was suffering from dehydration, her lips dry, her skin hot to the touch. Her pulse was rapid, her blood pressure unstable. She had bruises on her hands, marks that suggested she had pressed against the rough walls or the ground in confusion during the hours she was locked inside. The medical team worked quickly. They started IV fluids to replace what her body had lost. They monitored her oxygen, her heartbeat, her temperature. They cleaned her and replaced the soiled diaper she had been wearing for hours. Step by step, they pulled her back from the brink. For the staff, the case was more than clinical. It was deeply personal. One nurse later described how quiet the room was. The girl did not resist the treatment. She did not cry or fight. She simply lay still, her eyes following the movement of the people around her, silent, trusting, dependent. Doctors gave their report to investigators. The child had been abandoned, exposed to dangerous heat, and left in unsanitary conditions. The conclusion was clear. She had been placed in serious danger of death or long-term harm. For Child Protective Services, the next steps were immediate. CPS issued a statement. It was a carefully worded announcement, but behind the words was relief. Relief that she had been found alive. Relief that she was now out of the hands of the person who had abandoned her. Still, the trauma was undeniable. Experts in child psychology note that abandonment is not only physical, it is deeply emotional. For a child with autism, routine and trust are central. To be left in silence behind locked doors, by the one person who should never leave, creates a wound that no IV drip can repair. The grandmother visited her in the hospital. Witnesses said she broke down in tears when she saw her granddaughter lying in the bed, hooked up to monitors, her small frame weak but alive. She stroked her hair and whispered words of comfort, even knowing the girl could not reply. For the grandmother, it was both relief and heartbreak. Relief that she was alive, heartbreak that she had endured such suffering. The community's anger deepened as these details emerged. Local news outlets reported her condition, repeating the words dehydration and soiled diaper. For many, those words became symbols of the cruelty of the act. This was not just neglect. It was abandonment in its rawest, most deliberate form. Parents of other children with disabilities spoke out. They described the exhaustion that sometimes comes with caregiving, but also the fierce love that keeps them going. They could not comprehend how a mother could choose to walk away. Doctors later confirmed the girl made a physical recovery. After days of fluids and rest, her strength returned. She was stable, but the emotional scars, the confusion, the loss of trust, could not be measured by blood pressure or heart rate. She was transferred to relatives under CPS oversight. A new home, a new routine, an attempt at safety. But the questions lingered. How would she process what had happened? Would she understand that she had been left behind? Or would it remain forever, a silent memory etched into her trust and her fear? The medical report was entered into evidence. It described in precise clinical terms the state she had been found in, but between the lines was the undeniable truth. This was a child who had been discarded, and no amount of paperwork, no polished statement from CPS, could erase the image of her sitting alone on the ground inside those metal gates. The hospital room grew quiet after her release. The bed was cleared, the monitors shut off, but for those who had cared for her, the image remained. A child abandoned, rescued, treated, and now forced to begin a new chapter without the mother who should have been her protector. August 4, 2024. Nearly 2 months after the shocking discovery, the search for truth ends with handcuffs. At 7:30 a.m., officers with the Bandera County Sheriff's Office and San Antonio Police finalized their plan. They know where Natalie Rose Munno is staying. They have the warrant in hand. The charge: abandonment and endangerment of a child, a third-degree felony under Texas law. The evidence is undeniable. The surveillance footage, the medical reports, the false statements about a woman named Sara. Each piece has built a case strong enough to move from investigation to arrest. Officers move in. Patrol cars roll into the neighborhood. Plainclothes detectives wait nearby. A quiet street becomes the stage for a moment that has been building since June 13th. Munno is taken into custody without incident. Handcuffs click shut. The radio confirms what the city has been waiting to hear. She is transported to the county jail, booked, and charged. The official filing reads, abandoning or endangering a child without intent to return. The language is clinical, but the meaning is clear. She is accused of deliberately leaving her daughter in danger, walking away without intention of coming back. Local stations break into morning coverage. Headlines flash across websites. Mother arrested after autistic teen found in dumpster enclosure. For the grandmother, it is both a relief and a heartbreak. Relief that her daughter will finally face justice. Heartbreak that it ever came to this. She wanted accountability, but she also wanted a family that was whole. Instead, she has a granddaughter in recovery, and a daughter in custody. Community members respond with outrage. Social media fills with comments. How could any mother do this? That poor girl. Lock her up. Neighbors who once saw Munno as quiet, ordinary, now look back and wonder what they missed. Strangers, who only know her through the mugshot released to the press, condemn her with anger and disbelief. Commentators point out the broader issue. If it took nearly 2 months to arrest a mother when video evidence existed, what does that say about how quickly justice moves for children with disabilities? Prosecutors stand by the charges. Third-degree felony. Potential sentence: 2 to 10 years in prison. They make it clear, they intend to hold her accountable. Detectives file their final reports. The case that began with a grandmother's desperate call and an Amber Alert now moves to the courtroom. But for the community, the anger lingers. This was not a case of poverty, or accident, or mistake. This was a deliberate act of abandonment. A mother who led her daughter to a dumpster, and walked away. The story that began in silence, a child left behind metal doors, has now become a story shouted across headlines, newsrooms and social media feeds. Outrage, disbelief, grief, and the lingering question of how a system could allow it to happen. The arrest brings closure to one part of the story, but the trial ahead will decide her fate, and determine whether justice can ever match the harm that was done. August 2024. The investigation has ended, but the story now moves to a new stage, the courtroom.
The first hearing is scheduled just days after the arrest. Natalie Rose Munno is escorted into the Bexar County courtroom, dressed in a standard jail uniform, wrists shackled. Reporters fill the benches. Relatives sit quietly in the gallery. At the front, the judge calls the case to order. The charge is read aloud: abandoning or endangering a child without intent to return. The words echo through the room. The weight of the language is heavy, but the faces of those listening carry even more weight. The prosecutor rises first. Calm, deliberate, direct. He lays out the foundation of the case. Surveillance footage, the timeline, the mother's conflicting statements, the medical reports. He describes how the girl, nonverbal and autistic, was left in a dumpster enclosure for hours in the June heat. He points to the danger she faced: dehydration, injury, even death. The defense responds. They do not deny the footage. They cannot. Instead, they search for another path. They speak of mental strain, of the pressures of caregiving, of a mother overwhelmed by responsibility. They suggest that Munno believed she was leaving her daughter in safe hands. They imply confusion rather than cruelty. The grandmother sits in the second row, hands clasped tightly. Witnesses describe her eyes fixed on the defendant, searching for answers she knows she will not find. Other relatives shift in their seats, torn between anger and sorrow. Some wipe away tears, others stare coldly, as if the woman before them is a stranger. The courtroom itself becomes a theater of contrasts. On one side, the defense speaks of stress, misunderstanding, and lack of resources. On the other, the prosecution speaks of evidence, lies, and betrayal. The judge listens, taking notes, asking questions. The law is clear. Abandonment without intent to return is a third-degree felony. The possible sentence ranges from 2 to 10 years in prison. But what will justice look like in this case? That is the question everyone asks, silently, as the hearing moves forward. Reporters file updates in real time. Headlines flash across screens. Mother appears in court after dumpster abandonment case. Outside, protesters gather, holding signs that read "Protect our children" and "Justice for the vulnerable." Each side stakes out its position, but the outcome remains uncertain. Will the defense succeed in painting this as a case of desperation? Or will the prosecution's evidence convince the jury that this was abandonment, plain and deliberate? The girl herself does not appear. She is safe in the care of relatives, protected from the courtroom's chaos. Her absence is felt as much as her presence would have been. Every statement, every piece of evidence, circles back to her silent suffering on June 13th. The judge concludes the hearing. Dates are set. The trial will move forward, and as the gavel strikes, the room exhales. For the grandmother, for the community, for the investigators who watched the footage again and again, the question now is simple but heavy. 2 hours ago, we began with a grainy image from a parking lot camera. A mother leading her daughter into a dumpster enclosure, and walking away. Now, as the courtroom prepares to decide her fate, we look back at the story in full. A child abandoned, a grandmother desperate, a community shocked, a mother's betrayal, and a child's survival. The case has brought answers. We know what happened on June 13th. We know who was responsible. We know the charges filed, and the evidence that proves them. But some questions remain unanswered. Why did she do it? Was it desperation, exhaustion, or something darker? Only one person can give that answer, and she has chosen lies instead of truth. Could the Amber Alert have been faster? If the missing persons report had been filed sooner? If the system had connected the girl found on June 13th to the one reported missing on June 18th? How much fear, confusion, and delay could have been avoided? And most important of all, how will this teenager recover? She cannot speak the words of her trauma, but the memory remains. The silence of the dumpster walls, the searing heat, the absence of the mother she trusted. Those wounds do not appear on medical charts, but they shape the heart forever. Tonight, she lives with relatives. She is safe, cared for, and protected. But the shadow of betrayal lingers. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore. And for a child who depends on routine, who needs stability more than most, the path forward will not be easy. As the case moves through the courts, the public continues to ask the questions that the courtroom cannot answer. How do we protect children who cannot protect themselves?